Hello again, book lovers. Do you like Dickens? I don't know, I've never been to one, as the old joke goes. Do I like Dickens? Yeah, pretty much. However, I got out of the habit of reading fiction when I discovered history many years ago. I did have the habit of reading a Dickens novel for Christmas as a sort of Christmassy Victorian-y thing to do. So this year I thought I'd get back into it. And I got myself a copy of The Old Curiosity Shop. A nice long one, as they usually are. Almost 600 pages in this edition. What's to say of it? Well, I think it was a bad choice to make a review of, as it's certainly not one of my favourites, let's put it that way. Mawkish is an adjective that's been used to describe it. Of course, the relationship between the grandfather and little Nell comes across that way. And the unfortunate habit of grandfather of addressing Nell as thou all the time, which just sounds biblical and jarring. However, that's probably the way they did talk back then. There's all this question as well as what's going on with the V and the W in the old Cockney in Dickens. So, having stated that it really wasn't one of the best, I'd rather talk about Dickens in general, as I'll be reading more. I've got about 10 novels left to go. And the main thing to say is that people wouldn't write this these days, except in imitation. The style is a little bit impenetrable. Here's an example. From chapter 61. Even when the violence of these emotions had in some degree subsided, and he was beginning to grow more calm, this is Kit now, by the way, there came into his mind a new thought, the anguish of which was scarcely less. I mean, that's almost biblical to begin with. It continues, the child, the bright star of the simple fellow's life, she, who always came back upon him like a beautiful dream, who had made the poorest part of his existence, the happiest and best, who had ever been so gentle, and considerate, and good, if she were ever to hear of this, what would she think, exclamation mark. And that's just half of the paragraph. It goes on in a similar vein. I confess to skipping through that kind of thing. That did seem a little bit moralistic. Dickens was a good egg, wasn't he, in drawing attention to the plight of the poor. Doing a little bit of lit crit on the Old Curiosity Shop, we note that Nell is aged 13 and there's a lot of conniving around who inherits what and who belongs to who. Had she been 14, she would be more easily prey to some of the nefarious characters who would then be eligible to marry her by the laws of the time and commit their nefarious acts that way. Still, we have the usual panoply of Dickens characters, the too long descriptions, which sometimes contain hidden gems, so you should read them really. And this edition of the Old Curiosity Shop carried the original illustrations by Fizz, who's not one of my favourites either. Everybody seems to be ugly in a Fizz drawing. And I should maybe mention the ending, so if you don't know what happens, spoiler alert, Nell dies. Oh no, she's even taken up to heaven, according to the last picture, by a couple of angels. Now, there are a couple of things to mention about this. A, when I read it, I thought, well, there's really no need for her to die, was there? The novel didn't have to end that way, by any stretch of the imagination. So I wonder why Dickens did it. And B, this is, the world's worst spoiler alert. I mean, everybody knows that, don't they, if they pick up a copy of this? But of course, when they were reading it, they didn't know it. And there are some tales of people throwing the book down in a fury or becoming very grievous at the news, in inverted commas. Which leads me on to another point. You're not supposed to read this 500 plus pages in 2 or 3 days because you've got a lot of spare time. No, you're supposed to wait for the next episode. The next chapter, as they were serialised in magazines. I don't know how many chapters were in each one, as they seem to be of unequal length, but presumably they took you up to a cliffhanger, so that will affect the structure of the novel as well. Of course, Dickens is good at that, and there's always some unsuspected backstory to explain some earlier behaviour. In summary, I had a good time reading it. I like classical literature. I used to read a lot. Might get back into it. I won't be reviewing any more Dickens, but I will be reading a lot more. And one final point is that in the same way that when Harry Potter came out and people began to take pleasure in the fact that they saw children actually reading books, reading huge books, and even adults got back into reading thanks to J.K. Rowling's magnum opus. That was now a long, long time ago. That was a film franchise ago, and I'm recording this 2 days before 2026 begins. I received a private eye magazine this morning which contained the following article. A year after brain rot was named as Oxford's Word of the Year for 2024, new research shows it might be more than a catchy neologism. And then it tells us the American Psychological Association has found connections between the use of TikTok, Instagram, the short form videos, and poor attention span and less inhibitory control. Well, now there's a surprise. Quoting from the paper, repeated exposure to highly stimulating, fast-paced content may contribute to habituation in which users become desensitized to slower, more effortful cognitive tasks such as reading, Dickens for example, problem solving or deep learning, close quote. We might, according to the psychologist, be literally weakening the brain's capability for attention. If I were one of those psychologists, I might put on my list of possible points of advice, read Moby Dick, or any Melville, or Dickens, or Thackeray. I personally couldn't get on with Jane Austen, but I might give George Eliot another go, etc., etc. Of course, they will take time and they will take effort, but they will also tell you, in almost all cases, a cracking story with some vivid personalities in it and long sentences to stop your brain rotting.